Well, welcome back, everybody. So, isn't it fun? It's it's funny because it's actually a much lighter film than the other two. They're all great and very heartfelt and stuff, but this one just seems lighter, like the middle child, easygoing, and but we're still talking about mental health. And several other things. So we have a great panel here. I would love to kick it off, or not kick, I would like to kick off the panel by going around and having each of the panelists introduce themselves. Again, you can ask questions in the Q&A and you can upvote those questions. And just if the panelists could introduce themselves and maybe share something that resonated with them in the film. And let's start with you, Monica and Darian.
Hi, I'm Monica Lewis, and
I'm Darian Lewis.
And we're the owners of the Monica Lewis School of Etiquette.
She's the Monica, I'm the Lewis, and we're a partnership. We work with children, teens, adults. We teach them protocol, both virtually and in person.
And what resonated with me in the film is that how many people that use Snapchat and make their friendship based on the streak. And I was like, really? So our relationship is determined on how much interaction we do on a daily basis, right. And they're still trying to keep up that number.
Yeah, I agree.
Job. How about you, Mandy and Ella? Please introduce yourself and share something that resonated with you.
Yeah, I am Mandy, and this is my 16-year-old daughter, Ella. I am the author of Talk. It came out in 2017. I just released my second book this week. It's been a crazy week. And we have a nonprofit called Next Talk. What stood out to me. You want to go ahead and introduce that?
Oh, well, I'm Ella. I'm really just her daughter. I'm a junior in high school. Yeah, that's about it.
What really stood out to me is I loved the portrayal that social media can be used for good and bad. And as parents, what I'm really passionate about is this space of teaching our kids how to use technology and teaching them how to use it well. So it's not about bubble wrapping our kids or not giving them access, because this is their world, but how do we do that in a constructive way? And so I loved that the show portrayed that it can be used for good and bad. And I think that's on us. That's where we come in. Ella just started driving and I had to teach her how to drive that car. And the conversation started actually years before she got her driver's license. And so it's the same way with social media and being able to teach our kids gradually how to process this and how to handle it.
Yeah, and kind of just off of that, something that really stood out.
I think Mandy or Ella, can you, Mike, get closer to the mic?
Yeah, sorry. So something I really enjoyed was the whole segment on when the teenagers were talking about how parents may sometimes tend to be hypocrites when they say, I don't want you on your phone because you're a teenager and whatever, you're spending too much time on your phone, but at the same time they're like over here looking at their phone and on their computer answering emails. So it's like I really like that, and kind of just showing like parents, obviously I'm a teenager, so like I'm not really in your shoes, but as a teenager I'm not going to get off my phone if I don't see my parents getting off their phone, and like setting an example.
Yep, great point. Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Peterson, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. One of the things that I think is so important that was emphasized is when we're constantly on our devices and looking at our devices, we have no time to think, and we have no time to learn how to be uncomfortable. And so not having those uncomfortable moments and always having to fill them by looking at our phones, and then the consequences of that, not being able to actually interact with other people in person. And one of the things that I have noticed just in this time of the pandemic, being at home and working at home, and I live alone, is it's harder for me now to even have a conversation because I haven't had that, right? It's all been online. And so I think that was reiterated in the movie, having that space for time to think and to have those uncomfortable, awkward moments.
That's big. Those awkward moments they're so important to have. How about Jeff, Dr. Gentry?
Yeah, this time it was a little heavier to me than when I've seen it before for some reason. What stuck with me was someone said it's a public health issue. And so, you know, it just looks to me like our kids are being targeted. They're being bought, they're being sold. And I thought about when I was a kid, you know, we had a home telephone that was landline and TV, right? I thought, what if somebody was calling, you know, phone call after phone call after phone call after phone call to me? What would my parents think about that? And what if someone was coming to my door, you know, one person after another, asking to see me? You know, so something that I may, if I can work it in, touch on later as we go, or how it's affecting parent roles, and two roles in particular. One is a parent's role in facilitating self-regulation, regulation of emotions, thought, behavior, and how, particularly at an early age, social media can just step in, cut the parent out, and say, you don't need to regulate. It's not important. You don't want to regulate. You want to keep pushing the button, don't regulate. And then the other has to do with mediating the environment, which is basically interpreting the environment. And I'll maybe come back to that later. You think about a boundary around your family. Guess what? We used to have that back when I was a kid, and the parents kind of determined what information could get in and what information was not going to get in. And it's not that way anymore.
Yeah, that I gotta say, I love that analogy of just if you had all these people coming to your door, it'd be ridiculous. Even if all they did was kind of like tap or knock or throw a flower, it would be too much, right? Even though you don't have interaction with them that much.
Yeah, what if you just go, you open your door, they take your picture, they close the door, and they're gone, you know?
Yeah. Jimmy Carter.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Carter, board member with David's Legacy Foundation and a volunteer attorney with the Don't Bully Me Project. There were a lot of takeaways. I will say my favorite one word from the show was JOMO. Yeah. And I'm gonna really try to put that in practice. I think that the more nuanced takeaway that just started occurring to me was, if everybody knew what the real purpose of social media was and how much it was really designed to make you the commodity, it might be rejected quite a bit more. Maybe that's my oppositional defiance, but anyway, that was very, very interesting.
Jimmy, since we're with you, can you tell us a little bit more about the Don't Bully Me project and the legal consequences of some of the, you know, kind of social media activity that you're seeing, and, you know, it's sort of trending and the effect that it has on our digital footprint?
Absolutely. Well, the Don't Bully Me project pairs volunteer attorneys with the parents of children who are suffering from bullying or cyberbullying, so that the attorneys can help them on a volunteer basis. The consequences range from the very insignificant, I suppose, to quite serious. And what we do as attorneys is act under David's law to get injunctions where a court orders a child and the parents to stop bullying, and then orders the parents specifically to take reasonable actions to prevent bullying from continuing. And if that injunction is violated, it can result in contempt of court, which could be civil penalties or even jail time. So the range of bullying that we see is quite broad and often really shocking. Not only in the content, but the age ranges and the types of things that are said when you're hiding behind a screen are just really atrocious. So those things are permanent, and we need to teach our kids that, you know, not only does it really hurt people, but you know, even the child who's doing the bullying is really hurting himself or herself in the long run.
Yeah. You know, taking that, and Stephanie, coming over to you, like with regard to schools, can you talk a little bit about, you know, like what a digital media threat might look like, and how like teachers and parents can identify someone who's, you know, sort of negatively being impacted by social media?
So yes, so that's two questions. Digital threats are part of threat assessment. So we look at past school attacks, and we can see that there have been precursors or indications of their intent leaked online or on social media, except nobody knew how to investigate that and how to determine, because having thoughts are different than having behaviors. So a threat online may be, they're gonna regret that one day. They're gonna regret, my teacher is gonna regret telling me that one day. And so the threat assessment process is investigating that. Or in the form of bullying, you know, he's gonna be sorry that he did that. Sometimes it's even more specific than that. And as far as recognizing whether a student via, you know, a parent, looking at their child being concerned, or teacher looking at their child being concerned with their social media usage, it's very similar to other warning signs. So if they are having an addiction to it, it's hard for them to put it down. They won't go to sleep, or they are having trouble sleeping because they're constantly online. If you're recognizing a change in their behavior or a change in their social circle, they're not having friendships anymore, everything is online. And another one is when they're around people and they're not interacting with those people, they're just interacting with their devices. That is called, correct me if I'm wrong, Ella, but it's like phubbing, F-H-U-B-B-I-N-G, when you're interacting with, am I right? You don't know? I think it's called phubbing. And so basically you are putting somebody online ahead of somebody who's right there in person with you. And that can be another warning sign of somebody struggling with social media. There's a lot of other ones too, but looking at that change in your child's behavior, grades declining, those sorts of things.
Wow. I'd like to jump down to, thank you, Stephanie. I'd love to jump to Monica and Darian just to talk a little bit about digital citizenship and why it's so important, but not just our kids, but also for us as grown-ups.
Yeah, so digital citizenship, it's a big word, but when you really break it down and understand what we're implying here, it's talking about setting the proper expectations, boundaries, and behaviors for not only your children, but for yourself. Because one of the biggest takeaways is that our children are sponges. And so they're going to emulate and mimic what they see us do. So like Ella was saying, you know, if you're using your phone and saying to me that I can't get on my phone, then I'm going to be like, okay, fine. I just won't do it in front of you. So when we say, you know, be good digital citizens, we're saying that you have to practice and model the expected behavior for your children. Yeah. And once you set that behavior and set that tone and that practice for them, remain in control. We have a saying in our program called parent power. You have to take your power as a parent and you have to own it, rest in it, because ultimately you are the decision maker. And I'm not saying that you're a dictator, but you also have to put those boundaries in place for yourself. So if it's dinner time and there are no phones at the table, then there are no phones at the table. If it's an event where we're working and we're doing something together as a family and we say, okay, all devices off, all devices off. It's those simple, meaningful things that allow your children or those who you're in care of to see you doing it first. And then you can move the conversation even further to building their trust and them allowing you into their digital world. I think one of the biggest takeaways for us, in addition to the JOMO, is realizing the extent to which we're all dependent on our social media platforms to validate us. And I think one of the biggest things about being a good digital citizen is understanding that your validation should not come from external people who have nothing to do with you, but it should come from those people who care for you the most and from you, from within yourself first. Because if you don't care about yourself, then it's going to be very, very hard and very easy for others to control you. What do you think?
Another point is that we think of social media as only being the digital format, but any technology you use it to communicate, you are now a digital citizen. So that's not just your phone. That's just not your laptop. The game systems that your children have access to, PlayStation, they are talking to people. Right. And so we have to make sure that we put boundaries and set standards for our children, but then also verify what they say is true.
Yeah.
That means go into their history. If the history is deleted, that means they deleted something. If the history is blank, something is wrong. That is another alert. And so we want to make sure that we're practicing safety, being responsible, but yet being savvy.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. It's so true that it's kind of like online is just an extension of our lives. And so we need to look after our children and teach them the things that we would, just as if they were going into a park or going to school or going to someone's house. It's for some reason we seem to say once the kids are online, like we have no say or control. Yes, they have access to the world, but we still have access to parent, always. Thank you for that. Jeff, Dr. Gentry, and Mandy and Ella, I'm coming to you, and then we're going to get straight to the Q&A questions. So Jeff, do you exclusion or that isolating because of bullying can lead to loneliness? And what role do you think social media, technology, gaming, all that stuff, plays in that as far as inclusion and then also that exclusion piece? They kind of go hand in hand and can become unhealthy or out of balance.
Yeah, and they can be either passive or active. Again, going back to the back in the day comparison, if I wanted to go and be with some people when I was a teenager, I had to explain who I'm going to be with, what we're going to be doing, where we're going to be doing it, and when I'm going to be back. And I think that is not happening. And so that's part of that regulation. It's part of the just guidance and support that we lose when our kid enters into that social media world and crosses that barrier, and then we don't know who they're seeing, what they're doing. And it's just, to me, when I grew up, we didn't get to do that. There was accountability for where you are and what you're doing, and social media is really really difficult with that. And teenagers go through something from puberty in that time frame called egocentricity, where they feel like everyone is paying attention to them. It's like how when your daughter changes clothes 15 times before a concert. And so that just says the stakes are super high, right? And so if you don't get the approval after you've changed 15 times, that just adds to the impact of what's perceived as a social rejection or exclusion kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love those analogies. Sometimes just the standard stuff that we grew up with is completely applicable to today.
Well, something to understand about that is in the late 80s, I went through a family studies and marriage and family therapy program. And so we learned models of what was healthy family and what was not. And those things are not applying anymore. They're not fitting the same way. There used to be a diagram where you have a circle around a family and you assess the family for how porous those boundaries were and were the parents protecting and determining what information came in. And that's all just kind of out the window, it seems.
Yeah. I think we're going to get back to that somehow. Ella, so since we're all getting a sort of an education on latest terminology, because it is kind of happening fast. So now we all know phubbing, which I love. Doxing and cancel culture. Those are big ones that are trending right now. Can you sort of share a little bit about that? And what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, so my mom and I actually had a conversation about cancel culture a few weeks ago, and we realized we have very different definitions.
Oh, perfect. I was going to say, please define it. So for those in the audience that might not know.
Yes, so my mom was kind of thinking that cancel culture was more of like what I would define as just boycotting. So like if a company or someone believes in something that you don't like, you just kind of stay away from them, you unfollow them, or you don't buy stuff from that company or something like that. What I have found being on social media, particularly like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, those kind of platforms, is my definition of cancel culture is more of like a direct attack, trying to like purposefully like ruin someone's life, which sounds extreme, but I've seen it like on TikTok, especially if a video is leaked of someone saying something totally inappropriate. Usually that'll blow up, and then a lot of times I've seen people will find where that person works, where they go to college, and get them fired and expelled from their university.
Wow.
You know, all their friends will leave them because, like, you know, no one wants to be friends with someone who's mean and politically incorrect. So, you know, it's pretty crazy. Cancel culture is definitely, it's a big thing right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's always kind of been around, but what it's morphed into today is so much more of an attack than just staying away from something.
So can I ask you, like, how can a young person, a student, express themselves, something they don't like, perhaps, without that fear or without being canceled?
Well, I'd say that's kind of hard, especially if someone has an unpopular opinion. You know, again, I've seen on TikTok, you know, people just trying to respectfully voice their opinions, and it usually gets shut down. So I think that's just something that's really unfortunate in the world that we live in today, that people feel like they can't be free to express, you know, their opinions. I would say if that's something you feel really strongly about, I mean, you know, it's your opinion, so it's your right to share it, but be careful.
Yeah.
Share at your own risk.
Wow. And Mandy, you know, it's kind of scary to think about how some of this affects our kids, right? Because they're stuck. It's a conundrum. And it's also like the public shaming, not having the whole story. How can parents best deal with this?
Well, I mean, for me, it's like so critical that every child has a safe place. I think that's so important. And like for me, my mission is I want a parent to be that safe place, you know? And no matter if your kid is the one being targeted and canceled, you know, that they feel okay coming to you saying, oh my gosh, this video went viral and I said something I wasn't supposed to say, but you don't see what led up to it or whatever, you know, like being able to share that so that when they get in a situation, or maybe they did do something completely wrong, that you're like, how could you do this? That they're still okay coming to you. I always tell my kids, listen, if you find yourself in a situation where you're panicked, like for instance, you've shared a nude or you're talking with a stranger online and then all of a sudden it got out of control and now they want your address. And, you know, if you've done something that makes you feel like, oh my goodness, mom and dad are going to be so mad, like that's a red flag alert that you come tell me right now, because I will walk you through it and I will love you no matter what. Yeah. But if you try and hide it, or you try and get out of it, or you try and escape it by yourself, you could get in some real trouble. You know, you could be talking to you think he's a 35-year-old man online, but he's a sex trafficking pimp that's going to grab you and go. You know, I mean, it can happen. And so being able to build that safe place, that's like at the core of what I'm passionate about, is helping parents do that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That was great. Let's get into some of these questions. So Jennifer says, what if we got rid of the like button? People would crash, go crazy, because we're so trained to use it. We rely on it. Like it does have that, create that dopamine release on the brain. I'm curious, Ella, what do you think about that? What if suddenly social media just said, by the way, tomorrow there will be no more likes, only comments?
I actually do remember a period on Instagram, I think several years ago, where they decided they weren't going to like make the number of likes visible.
Right.
And it was like this whole thing. It like blew up everywhere. People are like, what? Like, how, like, why can't I see how many people are liking my photos? Like, I need that. I need that. And people are freaking out. And I was like, whoa, like, you should be able to like affirm yourself, but I don't, some people just.
You know, it's funny. This was last year. They were talking about it, and I think they tested it in some countries. And I heard that like some people would snapshot, like you would be able to see your own likes, but the rest of the world couldn't. So they were just taking, you know, screenshots of their own likes and saying thanks for all the love and sharing it. So they were still kind of. There's always a way. If anyone can figure out a way around anything, it's a kid. They are our future, and they only think like, how do we keep moving forward? So despite all the roadblocks, so we got to put up guardrails and seatbelts and airbags and, you know, like protect them in the process. So Chloe says, is there a reason you focused on twins and siblings in the teen interviews? So the twins, the blonde twins, are my kids, and that's my husband. And I thought it was fascinating. And I put all my kids in the movie. They always end up on the cutting room floor, except this time. And they're identical twins. They go to 2 different schools. They're both, you know, wore cheerleader outfits. And it was amazing how one always gets more likes than the others. And yet if you switch the pictures and the posts, and so that just sort of proved out the algorithm. They even learned to post at the right time and all this stuff that, you know, and thank God, you know, it's interesting. There was always like bikinis and we were like, please put some clothes on. And now since Black Lives Matter has emerged, they just post their passions and they're not posting the bikini shots anymore. Maybe 1 or 2. And it's so refreshing and so nice to see, you know, that they're kind of outgrowing that. But yeah, it was really just that. And we also wanted to share a little bit of our story of how social media played a wonderful, kind of a powerful and helpful role in our lives as well, when we lost our daughter, our eldest. So, okay, the next question is for, I think it's Anne. How much do the masks that we put on for social media contribute to the development of the imposter syndrome? So, and I'm thinking physical masks, but it's the masks, you know, not everybody puts on some other persona online. Ella, are you someone else online? Or are you just you sometimes? I mean, just like you wouldn't go to a party or the store or out on the street and someone says, how are you? And you're really having a tough time. You don't always just say, I'm having a tough time. Sometimes you don't want to talk about it. You want to say, yeah, I'm okay. And I don't think that's considered being someone else in front of people. I think sometimes there's a right time and place for it. I do think social media does sort of make us feel like we have to put out the best of ourselves. But I also think we can be just ourselves too. And I think COVID has helped us be just more ourselves sometimes. Maybe a little too angry sometimes, but it's interesting. I'm curious, do you act like you're someone else sometimes? And then Monica and Jerry, I'd love for you to chime in about what you've seen as well.
So yeah, I would say I definitely try my best to be like myself on social media. I definitely don't have like a big platform. Like I'm not an influencer or anything like that. Like I've just really my friends following me. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying about like, you know, most of us are not going to post a picture of us like crying on social media, you know, because we want to put forth the best image, like the happiest image of ourselves. And I'm not sure if I would really call that putting on a mask. It's more just like you wouldn't want strangers to see you in your most vulnerable state, you know? Just like if you were, you know, out shopping, you wouldn't really want anyone seeing you having an emotional breakdown or anything like that. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess I could kind of see it as, you know, putting on a persona, but not in the sense that I think most people would think.
And I'm just going to chime in. We have like our program was in over 300 to 400 schools, and I work with a lot of teenage girls. And we have this program called Social Media Detox, and it's an 8-week session. One of the sessions is that they're able to show different pictures of themselves. They are really masked because they spend so much time altering that picture until it's not them. And so then we go into saying, okay, why we're spending 6 hours or 5 hours altering a picture, and then you post it. So that's not the real you, you know, or even if you have a zit, you're gonna, you know, cover it up. And I have sat with girls that actually sit at the table or even at the school and spend time. So we had this challenge that you take a picture of yourself right now and post it. When I tell you, it was like pulling teeth, because now you're getting a chance to see what they really look like, and they were beautiful, beautiful. So yes, I do see a lot of girls, and not only in middle school, I'm talking about even in elementary, adults. Yeah. I work in the pageant industry. And so I get a chance to see a lot of, you know, masked, but it starts at an early age. We're thinking the target is middle school, high school. No, even in elementary, because there's a certain look that they want. So it is out there.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Okay, we got some more questions here. The intro shows kids posting to social media, but what advice would you give to parents who are constantly posting a play-by-play of their children of their lives on social media. I'm referencing kids who are under 18, and I will say I am guilty of that. I have posted a picture of my daughter sleeping because she looked like Sleeping Beauty, and I was just, she's like, her friends were texting her and saying, I can't believe your mom's so funny, ha ha ha. She posted a picture of you sleeping, and she freaked. She's like, you had no permission to do that. And I was like, but you looked so beautiful. And it's like, so now, and then I was on probation, like no posting of anyone in my family without permission. Which was hard for me, but anyone want to comment on that one? Yes, Dr. Gentry, Jeff.
I'll just say, my current take on it is that we shouldn't post pictures of anyone who's not able to give consent. My son is a sophomore in college here in San Antonio, and there was a point at which he told me, I guess he was in high school, maybe a junior or so, he said, no Facebook post that. And so I occasionally ask permission and we'll get permission, but it's usually grudging. He wants to control his online presence, and I understand that.
Yeah. There's technology that's being developed to where there's going to be facial recognition your whole lifespan. So your parent posts a picture of you as a baby, your job interview or the military can see every picture posted ever of your entire lifetime. So that's something that's being developed currently.
Wow.
And I'd like to throw just a real interesting nugget in there to what Dr. Gentry said. He believed that there should be no posting of by people who are unable to give consent. And legally speaking, that would be anyone under 18 years of age. Yeah. Which I think is interesting and may be it may sound a little draconian, but even with that expansive definition, I think it's still something to consider.
But what about okay, I'm getting super technical here. We post pictures of our newborn babies. They're not even, not of age. They're not even of coherence or like the ability to say, okay.
Well, okay, so maybe I'll throw in there that a parent, as a guardian, has the ability to consent for the minor, but anyone else posting of someone else's kid, maybe that would be inappropriate.
Yeah, yeah.
If I could jump in on this as a father, our children, we've made the decision that we carefully, speaking of masks, we carefully shape the image that we portray on social media of our family. For their protection and for the preservation of their own youth. So for us, every picture that we post has to have some type of meaning. So yes, we may post something like a milestone or a birthday or an accomplishment, but we're not posting every day, oh, look at my daughter, she just ate cereal, or look at my son, isn't he so tall and handsome? We try to make sure that we post things, and sometimes we even let them see what we're going to post before. So can you imagine a family of 7 and everybody has to give approval? That sometimes can be a challenge, but it helps everybody feel affirmed. It helps everybody feel a part. And we may not have to have that uncomfortable conversation when they're 20 about, I posted a picture of them in the tub, taking a bubble bath together, because we have triplets. Mm-hmm. So we have to resist the urge to try to post and dress them alike and all that kind of stuff, because sometimes they don't like it.
But most of them want us to post more, but we won't post
for their own purposes. They're teenagers now, so they like the interest that they're getting from the girls. So that's a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah, that's so.
And I would love to jump in here. So when my kids got older, 5th grade, that is when I would not post anything on social media without their permission, because that's kind of when I got really serious about, oh my gosh, I have to build this safe place where they're willing to tell me anything. So what happens if they tell me about a crush or something that's going on and then I'm posting about it? Like if we're posting without their permission, it tells our kids like that's not a safe place for me, because who knows who she's going to tell or text or whatever, right? And so if we're really serious about building a safe place for our kids, and so just before we started here, I had taken a picture of Ella and I and texted it to Maureen, and I said, can I post this on social media? And she looked at the caption and everything. But here's the thing, Facebook is where I am. I don't post it on Instagram. That's her platform. Like, I have an Instagram account. It's not public because I'm only there because my kids are there. My spot is Facebook and Twitter. Hers is Instagram, and I give her that space. Like, I'm not going to be posting all your stuff on Instagram. So kind of like, and that was a lot of like conversations. Like, is it okay for me to post here? Is it okay for me to post there? And then they weigh in on, well, we're over on it here on Instagram. So, you know, we only do like milestone moments, like what Darian was talking about on Instagram.
And I would just like to add one small little thing too. Another thing that's happening is parents are proud of their children. And for instance, this is an easy scenario. They're in a dance outfit doing a dance class, and those images are being sold to child pornography rings. So it's innocent pictures, and they are being stolen off of social media and sent around. So that's another thing to be careful of and be aware of, and not post every single picture on social media.
That's just so creepy. Oh my God. Okay, we got another question here, and then we're gonna kind of go around and wrap up. You didn't talk, okay, so it says here, we didn't talk about monitoring the time our kids are spending on our phones and some of the features that cell phones offer us to control how much access they have and how much they use it. My college daughter has set daily time limits for apps, such as 30-minute time limits, and then phone kicks her off. So does anybody want to, I mean, I can certainly talk about, does anybody want to talk about, you know, Mandy, you might have some tips for how and I have a whole other take on parents controlling their kids on their phones, but please dive in.
This is going to differ by age. You know, when they're smaller, you are regulating more and more. But as they get older, what you want to do is you want them to be able to regulate on their own. Because they're going to, you know, Ella's 16. She's probably going to be moving out in 2 years. So I don't want her to get to college and be like, well, mom's not here to tell me to get off my phone, so I'm just going to keep going, right? So we're having those conversations, you know, between us about why is it important to not have our phone at bedtime? Why is it important to shut it off at meals and have conversations with people? And by explaining the why behind it, then it's not about me dictating rules. It's about her understanding and taking responsibility for her health, you know, and her healthy habits. And so just last weekend, like on Saturday, she just was like, hey, I took a TikTok break. I'm no social media for me all weekend. I didn't even know it was happening, right? But she just decided on her own, this whole weekend, I was no social media for me. And so when we're having those conversations about why, they're more apt to latch onto it and take responsibility for monitoring their own self. And this is as they get older. Obviously, when she was 4 and 5 playing on the family tablet, we had to set regulations. But as they get older, we want to help them self-regulate and explain the why behind it.
And I think that's a really good point. Developmentally, one of the things you're doing is you're putting on the table at an early age the concept of self-regulation. And you're returning to that conversation and sort of you're making them aware of their own development. And that in itself that's a whole side education that a child is getting, because, you know, typically we don't talk about self-regulation with a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. And if we start that conversation at that point and we can actually reflect on your trajectory of you're taking on more ownership of your own self-regulation. You remember when I used to be into all your stuff and now we're doing it this different way now? So yeah, it's good stuff.
That's a great, that's great information. I also, Dr. Jerry Bubrick, who's in Angst, we're on panels a lot together, and he always says, you know, like parents in the beginning we're their caretakers, we keep them safe, we're involved, and then there's a point where we just become consultants. And we really are can only be there when our kids need us, or ask for our help. And in the meantime, we kind of have to help, just sort of be there we got to step back. And that's really tough. But I love the whole idea of teaching them about self-regulation at a younger age. We have a great question here about which I think is super timely. Any suggestions or recommendations on how to navigate this during COVID? My teen is distance learning, so computer is a huge chunk of the day, and then socializing is mostly all on the phone. So how do we find balance when we live online?
Well, for us, what we do is we set times. So dinner time for us is a no phone zone. And we incorporate table topics. These are things that we just kind of started doing. So my wife and I will sit down and we'll just come up with some really off the wall questions to ask the kids. And, you know, that becomes our table topic. So it forces our children to engage with us. It forces us to engage and connect with them. And I'm not saying we're having some kind of Norman Rockwell moment, you know, or June Cleaver moment where we're all around the table. But whenever we're eating, it could be McDonald's, you know, as we're driving to track practice with the kids. But that time of us eating is our time to connect. It's a designated time in the day that we say all devices off. The second thing we do is we use technology. So not to plug anything, but our internet provider has the app where you can shut the internet service down at a certain time of night. We use that as well. And we're very vigilant about that because we understand that, you know, our kids need that time to rest and recharge. And then sometimes we'll even take all devices up. One night we took every device up, locked it away in the room, and we pulled out Monopoly. And we played Monopoly till 3 a.m. It was quarantine. Everybody's online. You know, it's not hurting anything. But what it did was it just kind of reset everything. And it allowed us to really check in and really see what's going on in the lives of our boys and our young girl, our young daughter.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Good question here from Donna. In your opinions, should social media, cyberbullying, technology training be a mandated course for high schoolers to take in order to graduate? I think you should take it actually in middle school or whenever you have started using a phone. Yeah. But does anyone else have any opinions? Simple answers. You think should be a course that's taught in school? And maybe
I would agree. Too.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think a parent ed course would be good too.
Right. I think, but we could start actually in elementary and you can introduce it there and it'll be a gradual integration into the curriculum. So kind of like think about the way in which we introduce like subjects like history, where, you know, you introduce them to the concept and then each year it builds as their developmental cognition grows, it grows along with them. So by the time they get to high school, they're fully evolved, fully educated, well-versed in, you know, the accountability factor that comes along with using social media and technology.
Yeah. And rules change as you get older. What is acceptable in elementary school changes to what's acceptable in high school or what you are allowing them to use. And one thing I wanted to mention, to piggyback off something somebody said earlier, if you have fight or pushing back or fighting with your kids about boundaries or rules, one of the things I talk about all the time is you can feel you can feel happy and sad. And the same is true, you can use and, or there are two truths. So you can be sad that I'm taking away your device, and the other truth is that I'm your parent and I'm in charge of the responsibility taking care of you. So it's validating what they're feeling and what their experience is and having two truths. I am your parent, I set the boundaries, and I understand, and having that empathy, I understand that this is hard for you and this is how you connect with your friends.
Yeah. These are really interesting times. Okay, we have to wrap it up, but I do love to, there is one question here, and I think we should take a second to answer it, which is, you know, the impact on our mental health, our use of social media, not just the person who's actually using the social media and the impacts of the likes and the comments on our own self-esteem, self-worth, but also the person who might be receiving negative, you know, negative interaction from people through social media, and just that whole sort of negative thing, but the addictive piece of it too, like that release of chemical on the brain that keeps us going back for more, like a, you know, and I think that there are people who are more addicted than others, but I don't know if Stephanie or Jeff, if you want to address the sort of real addiction aspect of social media or technology.
Yeah, I don't think that can be overstated. When you were talking about reinforcement, I was thinking of the slot machine. A couple of people in the film mention about this intermittent reinforcement, reinforcement of rewards, where that is the strongest form of reinforcement, and it's also the most difficult to, in behavioral terms, extinguish or to make go away. It's the hardest habit to break. It is what makes gambling go. It's what makes pro sports go. You know, So when you pick up your phone, you don't know what you're going to get. It could be something really good, or it could be not so good. And that is really powerful reinforcement.
Yeah. Well, I always like to end this with each of the panelists to please go around and just share, like, what one thing would you love for this audience to take away, whether for themselves or to help someone else or to make a change, a positive change, or just to remember. Stephanie, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I think the takeaway should be recognizing the power, the impact, and the influence that technology and social media has on all of us. And we can use that for good, and it can be used for nefarious reasons as well. But when you allow your child to have access to social media or technology, just recognize the influence and the power and this way that it can have on your child and yourself.
Beautiful. Jimmy.
I would say the takeaway that we often give to students and parents when we're presenting to them at David's Legacy Foundation is to remember to be kind, both to yourself and others. And I think that has a number of overtones to the like philosophy and being addicted to and spending too much time on social media. If you're being kind to yourself, you'll give yourself some JOMO, which I'm going to continue to integrate.
I love that. How about Mandy, Ella?
Yeah, so I would probably just say a really important takeaway from this would be, like, for parents and kids, you have to communicate with each other. You know, technology, like, it's a really big, prominent thing in our society. And, you know, if a parent is trying to talk to their teen about, hey, I think you're spending too much time on your screens, you know, there's civil ways to approach the conversation and not just yelling and saying, oh my gosh, you spend so much time on that stupid phone, you know, get off right now. You know, if you say that to us, we're going to want to resist. It's just kind of in our nature. We kind of like the rebellion. So, you know, if we have a good, honest conversation about, you know, this isn't healthy, and like I've been able to recognize, you know, this isn't healthy for, you know, my mental health to be on screens all day, you know, that helps me self-regulate.
And parents, you know your kid better than anyone, right? So if you see them, you know, my son, if he's moody after playing Xbox for a number, you know, you can gently say, hey, would you be like talking to me like that if you weren't on that screen for all those hours? Like, make them think about what's causing you to have so much attitude with me right now. You know, without making them feel shame, we're wanting to just teach them and become more aware of what's going on. And to wrap up, like, for our segment, I would say, you know, parents, like, this starts with us. Like, they're not going to have an automatic balance with social media. Like, this is our responsibility. And I know that we're learning it right along with them, so that it's really tough. You know, we had people teach us how to drive a car. Nobody taught us how to use Facebook or Instagram. And then all of a sudden we have to teach it to them. So think of it like I'm walking hand in hand with her, and we are going through this together. And so when I find I'm off balance, I tell her, and it helps her see when she's off balance. And so it has to be that continual conversation to help us be more aware of what's happening on our screens.
Yeah. How about you, Dr. Jeff? I always want to say Dr. Jeff. How about you, Jeff?
When I get my TV show. You know, I think I experienced this, and, you know, I went through a master's program in human development and family studies, and I really struggled with this as a parent, felt out of control. And I think something that I learned from the film, and also Monica and Darian are doing, it's not so much controlling the time that they're on, it's dealing with the time that they're off and having some negotiation about what that is, how much it is, and what it looks like. And I think that the way that Monica and Darian described that, it just sounded like they're able to feel, to reclaim some sense of facilitating their kids' development apart from social media but in a way that's not mean, it's not dictatorial, and it's also looking for ways for the family to do things together and enjoy each other. So my hat's off to you all for that.
Wow.
And Monica and Darian.
Well, we're not perfect. We still struggle with this. I think one of our biggest takeaways is that no one is perfect, and you're going to stumble through this process. Because, like, you know, Mandy and Ella, you hit it right on the head when you said that there was no instruction manual with social media and dealing with tech. We're learning it, okay? Because my 6-year-old can work our brand new smart TV better than I can. And so we find ourselves sometimes chasing behind, you know, our children, trying to catch up. I think the best thing to do is give yourself that wiggle room to learn and allow them to teach you. And then have that conversation like, you know, you're teaching me this. And so how can I help you maintain those boundaries? Okay, so let's put some ramifications around it on things that I can control. I control the lights, I control the utilities, I control the Wi-Fi. So as long as I'm in control of those things, I think we can work out. This is a little give and take. You give me the respect and the accountability to the rules that I set in place, and I'll give you respect and I'll give you access to the things that you like to do.
And on another note, parents, walk in awareness. Your children are watching you. And so if you want them to be responsible on the internet, social media, being kind, guess what? You're going to have to be kind. You're going to have to be respectful, because they're going to only pick up what they see from you. And if they don't pick up from you, they're trying to mimic their other friends. But because you have put in a system in place, they're going to eventually get back on course. So parents, walk in full awareness.
Yeah, I love that. I think if I were to share a little, you know, I watch this movie a lot, and I feel so grateful to have these conversations and get to meet such fabulous people like you and interact with the audience. And I learned something every single time. I learned fubbing. And I will say, I'm a big believer in how important words are, and not just what we say to other people, but what comes out of our mouth and we hear ourselves say. And I think that during these times of COVID, where we are doing just about everything online, that we're careful not to say to our children or even to ourselves, you're addicted. Like, that's a big word. And it feels like, well, gosh, it's like programming. If you keep saying you're addicted, it just makes it harder to think, how am I going to find balance? And while it may seem like it, I would prefer to say, we're on our phones more than ever. We are using these way too much. Let's figure out ways to create balance. Like, frame this whole thing that we're going through in a more hopeful, positive light. I feel like that kind of lifts the heaviness out of it. And then I'm a huge fan every time of I loved it when I learned it, and I couldn't wait to share it in the movie, was the little brain hacks. Whether it's grayscale, trust me, you turn your grayscale for a day, it is the most boring thing you have. And you do not want to be on it. You actually want to be on your computer, because at least there's color there. But you don't want to be on your phone. Try just doing social media for a whole day in black and white. It is not exciting. It doesn't light up the brain. You are hacking your own brain and creating a little more balance just naturally. The other thing I would say, which we didn't get to ask everybody, is don't use your phone as an alarm clock. When you wake up, just spend that minute feeling your feelings, thinking your own thoughts, not being bombarded with what happened while you were sleeping, because then everyone else owns you. And you can't, if you don't connect with yourself at the top of the day, you can't go out and connect with other people very effectively. So that minute, that 2 minutes, however long it is important for you. And then the last thing I would say is 20 minutes is the secret number, where they did a study that if you are on social media or certain gaming sites, or the ones that kind of feel toxic after a period of time, if you're on it for more than 20 minutes, you can sort of fall into regret. So if you put a timer on, go check your social media and cut yourself off at 20 minutes, you're kind of in the safe zone. And if you did it once, twice, 3 times a day, you feel like you're totally getting your fix in, but you've not spent more than an hour. And that's a really cool hack. So I love to sort of trick myself into being healthier. So it's like having a drink in between your vodka soda for the grown-ups, right? So anyway, I have so enjoyed meeting everyone, and what a great audience, what a great discussion. I know that David's Legacy Foundation has made this screening and this panel discussion available for 2 weeks through a dashboard that I believe they are sending out. Cole, you may have to correct me or put something in the chat about how that happens. I do know there's a $10 pay-per-view, and proceeds, a certain amount of that proceeds goes towards David's Legacy Foundation. So I hope that you all stay safe and find balance with social media. And of course, like anything, be kind to yourself. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt and Maureen and David's Legacy Foundation. And what an awesome panel. Thank you.
Thank you.